Great to see you all. These days when people say, I could just stay home in my pajamas and watch this, right? And you came out. Brave people. Thanks for coming. Good evening. We're going to have a good conversation tonight with Eddie Glaude, Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. on race and democracy. But before we do, I want to turn our thoughts to another democracy, nearly 5,000 miles away in Ukraine. As the holy season of Lent begins for some of us here at Georgetown, Russia's immoral and illegal and evil attack on Ukraine requires, I believe, people of faith and conscience to bear witness to our faith, our commitment to democracy, and for some of us, our fidelity to Jesus, who told us, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Let me make a distinction between peacemaking and peace-loving, or just peace-praying. It's time to understand what peacemaking might look like in this time. So on Ash Wednesday yesterday, I joined Pope Francis and millions of other people of goodwill around the world in praying and fasting for an end to this horrific violence against the people of Ukraine. So please join me in a few short moments of silence as we lift our thoughts and our prayers for the people of Ukraine and the people around the world rising up in protest. Let's have a few moments of silence. Thank you. So I welcome you tonight to this second public event hosted by the Center on Faith and Justice, which I'm honored to lead as the founding director. My name is Jim Wallace. In addition to leading the center, I hold the inaugural chair of Faith and Justice at Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy. The Center on Faith and Justice, first event held last fall, hosted Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock. Some of you were here for that, and Representative Terry Sewell. We focused on voting rights, and particularly the dozens of attempts now by state lawmakers to suppress and deny the right to vote, as well as to subvert and actually overturn actual elections. These lawmakers are continuing a painful but long tradition in this country of white politicians letting racial prejudice rather than human rights guide their actions. That racist history is what Vincent Harding had in mind when he wrote his well-known essay, "Is America Possible?" which provides the theme for our conversation today. Is America possible? It's still a good question. For Harding, a close confidant and fellow freedom fighter with the Reverend Dr. King, that rough and bloody query, his words, has, he said, always been at the heart of the African-American quest for democracy in this land. For Harding, the answer to the question of, is America possible, was a qualified yes. He based his hard-won hope on movements, experiences, relationships, and conversations such as we hope to have tonight. When young Americans are brought together with historians, scholars, and other leaders who recognize that we are all, as the saying goes, citizens of a country that does not yet exist. You say it again, we are citizens of a country that does not yet exist. Vincent Harding was a dear mentor to me, and in our house was known as Uncle Vincent, who helped us teach my elementary, then middle school, then high school boys about their country and their lives. We are honored tonight to welcome Dr. Eddie Glaude to join us in this important conversation. As you know, Eddie Glaude is one of the nation's most prominent scholars, preeminent scholars. Dr. Eddie S. Glaude Jr. is a passionate educator, author, political commentator, and public intellectual who examines the complex dynamics of the American experience. His writings include Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism, and the Politics of Black America, and his most recent New York Times bestseller, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. If you take my class, that's required reading, cover to cover. It takes an exhaustive look at black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenge we face as a democracy. Of Baldwin, Glaude writes, Baldwin's writing does not bear witness to the glory of America. It reveals the country's sins and the illusion of innocence that blinds us to the reality of others. Baldwin's vision requires a confrontation with our history, with slavery, Jim Crow, with whiteness, to overcome its hold on us. Not to posit the greatness of America, but to establish, as Eddie Glaude says, the ground upon which to imagine the country anew. That's what we'll do tonight with Eddie Glaude. Highly accomplished and respected scholar of religion, Glaude is a former president of the American Academy of Religion. His books on religion and philosophy include An Uncommon Faith, a pragmatic approach to the study of African American religion. African American religion, a very short introduction, and Exodus, religion, race, and nation in early 19th century Black America, which was awarded the Modern Language Association's William Saunders Scarborough Book Prize. Glaude is the James S. McDonnell Distinguished University Professor and Chair of the Department of African American Studies, a program he first became involved with shaping as a doctoral student, as a candidate there at Princeton. He's also on the Morehouse College Board of Trustees. He frequently appears in the media, columnist for Time Magazine, as an MSNBC contributor on programs like Morning Joe and Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. I always like to say that Eddie Glaude, when they ask him a question on those shows, he always finds a way to go deeper than the question being asked. He rarely appears on Meet the Press on Sundays. He'll be on this Sunday, watch for him, combining a scholar's knowledge of history, a political commentator's take on the latest events, and an activist's passion for social justice. Glaude challenges all of us to examine our collective American conscience. For this Center on Faith and Justice, to bring together a scholar, a political commentator, and an activist is what this center is all about. Eddie Glaude is also a friend and a companion in these struggles, one who bears witness, as James Baldwin exhorted us to do, with a voice that is heard by many in America today. So tonight, I am blessed to introduce to you Eddie Glaude. Well, it's good to see all of you tonight, and good to have Eddie here for this conversation. Last time we were together, it was about voting rights. And if you recall, with Senator Warnock and Representative Sewell, we got into democracy, voting rights to democracy. So here we are tonight to talk to Eddie Glaude about democracy. And these are the conversations, Eddie, that Vincent Harding thought gave him hope. he was always struggling with his qualified yes to the question, is America possible? So these kinds of discussions, I think, we all really need. So you have written that a moral reckoning is upon us. But you've talked about two betrayals of other moments of moral reckoning. And you called now for a third founding. So not just is America possible, but how? How is America possible?
Well, first of all, let me just thank you for your example, your witness, your courage, your insistence on your faith in public. To understand that, as Cornell says, justice is what love looks like in public, right?
That's right.
And I want to, I'm so excited about the Center on Faith and Justice here at Georgetown. So it's a delight to be here in conversation with you about these pressing issues in this extraordinary moment. I want to thank all of the folks who are behind the scenes making this happen. We have to give a shout out to the invisible labor that makes our lives possible. You know how people can forget these folks? So to your question, at every turn, when America seems as if it's on the precipice of being otherwise, it doubles down on its ugliness. At every moment when a new America seems to be about to be born, the umbilical cord of white supremacy is wrapped around the baby's neck, choking the life out of it. And in some ways, we have to be better midwives. So it's a qualified, yes, I agree with Vincent Harding. Because America is more than an idea, it's an argument, it's a fight with bodies left in the wake. With bodies left in the wake. But in that moment that you described, I talk about these two historical coordinates, right? This first Reconstruction, which historians describe as the second founding, where you get the modern U.S. nation state that comes into being, passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. In some ways, the 14th Amendment we're still fighting over right now. The 15th Amendment, right, which guaranteed black men the right to vote, not black women, black men the right to vote, we're still fighting over right now. And then you ask the question, what did we get in response? You got convict leasing, another form of slavery, in which black labor was conscripted by the repressive state apparatus to help build cities like Birmingham. You get Jim Crow in the South, obviously. De facto the jury segregation and de facto segregation, the ways they work together intimately. But you also get the ideology of Anglo-Saxonism. Because at the very moment in which the United States is consolidating the regime of racial apartheid in the South, there are America's imperial ambition. Millions of people of color are being brought under U.S. rule in the Philippines, Puerto Rico. So our export isn't just baseball. We bring the racial logics to these islands at the very moment in which we're So Anglo-Saxonism is not just an ideology of the South. It's the ideology of the nation in some ways, right? So at that moment, we were about to be otherwise, boom, we double down. Talk about the mid-20th century, Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. Last major piece of legislation of the Great Society is the Fair Housing Act of 68. Reagan is elected 15 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act to undo it all. And remember, in 1981, Reagan finally agrees to the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act, but he says it needs to be amended. He stipulates that we need to reauthorize the VRA, but it needs to be amended. What did he want amended? He wanted to get rid of Section 5 around pre-clearance. 2013, Shelby v. Holder did exactly that, which unleashed everything that we're experiencing in this current moment in some ways. So what did we get in response? They elected Nixon twice. Mm-hmm. The response to Dr. King, half of Dr. King's head being blown off, was Nixon twice. What else? The tax revolt in California, which undermines the social safety net of the New Deal, basically begins to shred it. What else happens? Call for law and order, puts in place the building blocks of the carceral state. Every turn. So how? Well, I mean, that's a conversation that's going to, if the answer to that is going to unfold over the course of this conversation, because I want to keep talking.
One of the things that you just said now twice, I'd like to pick up, doubling down. Yeah. We've talked about this, you and I, often, where you feel like you've made some, as they say, progress, right? These two moments of promise. And then they double down again and again and again. The pushback is always so strong. So, which makes me think, and I talk to my students about this, the difference between, I'll put it, reform and refounding. Reform is always incremental. And we see how we're doing, and well, this went well. What do they say? 1 step forward, 2 steps back, all that stuff you hear. You're talking not just about incremental reforming. You talk about, based on those betrayals, what refounding would look like. It's a whole nother thing. So is America possible with just incremental reforming, as they seem to think here still? Even the liberals think that, right? But you're talking about something deeper than reforming. You're talking about refounding. How would that make America possible?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, when we say that America is an idea, an argument, a fight, we have to ask ourselves, what are we arguing over? What are we fighting about? It's these basic ideas that all men and women are equal. Right? The application of some basic principles that have been, since our founding, shadowed by this belief that some people, because of the color of their skin, ought to be valued more than others. That white supremacy has overdetermined, distorted, disfigured democracy in this country. So what does it mean to tinker around the edges of a place that's committed to that idea? So Lincoln can save the Union, can shatter slavery, but he still believes that white men are superior to black men, that white women are superior to black women. And so the situation that's at the heart, that's at the heart of the rot of the polity isn't resolved, right? So we want to tinker around the edges. And what's interesting is that as folk tinker around the edges, people are dying. I have to raise my babies in the midst of it, you know? And so part of what we mean by refounding is, what does it mean to discover in America, shorn of the belief that some people, because of the color of their skin, ought to be valued more than others? And how many times has France been founded? How many times have they started the calendar over? Right? And so part of what I say about, instead of moving from first Reconstruction to the second Reconstruction, I say we need a refounding. We need a third founding, a reimagining of our relationship to each other, a different kind of moral and social compact, not contract, right, which announces our obligations to each other, shorn of this insidious idea that because of the color of your skin, you are owed something more than others.
So James Baldwin said that lie is at the founding, but still at the heart of America. You call that the value gap, this racial hierarchy that some people are less equal than other people, or what we would say, some people are made in the image of God or not. I want to say, the Bible says we're all made in the image of God. Do you believe it or not? I mean, that's the heart of the lie. So all the June 6th stuff, all we've been talking about around here is the big lie of the election being stolen. But I think on June 6th, underneath the big lie that they were putting out again was the bigger lie. This is the bigger lie underneath the big lie of the election being stolen. And the people who are promoting the big lie of the election being stolen are the ones who exemplified the bigger lie of racism, in particular, white Christian nationalism.
Absolutely. Remember, it's not just simply loud racists who are making this argument. There's a reason why in the history of American Christendom you have debates about monogenesis and polygenesis. That is, these people couldn't be, of the same making from God. So we're going to try to give an account of different origins, as it were. But beyond that, that January 6th, man, they said stop the steal. And where were they talking? They were talking about Atlanta, Philadelphia, Milwaukee. Fascinating. Right? Stop the steal. Whose votes didn't count? And really, the stop the steal is really a reflection, in my view, and I'm really interested in what you have to say, is a reflection of the terror and panic in response to the demographic shifts in the country that are impacting how our politics take shape, right? So there is a sense in which those among us there are some among us who cling to the idea that this nation must remain a white nation in the vein of old Europe. And Obama's election in 2008, right, threw so many of them into a kind of full-blown panic, as well as those commercials on television with those racially ambiguous children eating Cheerios and the like, right? So there's this sense in which America doesn't look like it's supposed to look, and its politics reflects this. And so we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to address immigration. We're going to keep brown folk from coming from the southern part of it. We're going to begin to keep folk from voting. We're going to figure out how to rig the terms so that we can keep this nation white.
I was told yesterday in Michigan, my home, where they were going to cover up Wayne County, where Detroit is. One of my friends there, he said, they've got this new gerrymandering going on, redistricting. And it's gonna take the number of elected black representatives from the State House and the Congress, take it down from 17 to 5. Happening right now in the state of Michigan. So the people who said the election was stolen, the big lie, they are out to steal the next two elections. Those same people. So it is the elephant in the room for all of you policy people in every conversation in this town about almost any issue is the changing demographics of this nation. So to put it in a sentence, they're trying to prevent changing demographics from changing democracy.
Right, they're not committed to the idea, Jim, of us ever being a genuinely multiracial democracy.
Which you wrote about in your op-ed in the Washington Post for Black History Month, right? You wrote that, it's a great quote, the refusal in your op-ed about Black History Month, the refusal to imagine us as a multiracial democracy.
Yeah. Dr. King said in Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, that for the most white Americans, equality is seen as a loose expression for improvement. A loose expression for improvement. That's the tinkering around the edges. Or equality is often thought about, or racial justice is often thought about as a philanthropic enterprise, a charitable gesture, something that you can give to me, right? And if that's the frame, then the frame is still defined by the belief that some people are valued more than others, that equality is your possession to give to me. You see, and who are you to give me equality? That doesn't make any sense to me on a certain level, right? And so there's this fundamental belief. How can I put this? There is natural liberty and acquired liberty. White folk have natural liberty, and the rest of us have acquired liberty.
Concessions.
Right. And that evidences itself in a different form of citizenship. Who can claim ownership of the country, and who should just simply shut up and be grateful? Shut up and play basketball. Right? And so there is a genuinely multiracial democracy. In a genuinely multiracial, those assumptions aren't circulating. They don't define the substance and content of what it means to exercise the benefit and burden of citizenship, right? And so McConnell doesn't believe, I would contend. He doesn't believe in a multiracial democracy at all. But I would also argue that Joe Manchin doesn't believe in it. And now that makes some people uncomfortable, but I don't give a damn.
Well, did you see where McConnell had this slip where he talked about, he said, well, voting turnout was pretty good for African Americans, almost as good as Americans.
It's Freudian all the way. It's Freudian all the way.
So historically, as you point out, white people in power wanted to do two things: make it harder for black people to vote, make it harder, and then in the end, not count or miscount or recount their votes. Now we see this happening all over again. Now, historically, your parents and grandparents fought all this and sometimes thought they'd won. And here we are again, fighting the same battle over again.
Feels Sisyphean, doesn't it?
And it's exhausting.
It is exhausting, but you know, I come out of a blues people, a blues tradition. You know, B.B. King's "Nobody Loves Me But My Mother," and she could be jiving too. There's no naivete about this place. The great scandal in black life, the great scandal that we never want to reveal, is that we really don't trust you. We really know who you are. And the great scandal of American life is that you're afraid that we're going to tell the world who you really are. So that assumption, I know y'all can help me flesh this out, right? What I'm saying, right? This is what I'm trying. What oftentimes we will normalize Dr. King's invocation of nonviolent love and lose sight of how miraculous it actually was, because we normalize it. There's a deep-seated suspicion about the moral character of the country, given the long-standing, treatment, the historical record. So what I've come to believe, it's Sisyphean. You ask yourself, how do we keep rolling this boulder up the hill? And then I find myself reaching for Talib Kweli's, well, it's not the end. It's not getting the boulder up the hill. It's the beautiful struggle itself that becomes the aim and end, right? So otherwise, right, I would drink too much Jameson. Yeah. I would give up because my baby is having to go through this. I went through this. And Jim, one of the things that we don't talk about when it comes to, say, the violence that killed Reconstruction, Reconstruction didn't just collapse, it was murdered.
Because it was working.
Right? And so one of the things people don't say is that we talk about the emergence of the Klan, but once 1871 Congress holds its hearings, Klans disperse, the violence becomes micro. They are assassinating poll workers. They're attacking activists in their homes. So the fact that they shot Medgar Evers in the carport, that goes back to the 1870s. That particular kind of micro act, right? It's not some organized violence, right? In some sense, right? So there is a kind of daily terror aimed at policing black folk in the exercise of citizenship, right? And so there's a reason why these folks are showing up at school boards right now. There's a reason why they're doing exactly what they're doing, because it's having an impact downstream. So the people who would get excited about politics aren't going to run upstream. They just throw their hands up, right? So this is, history repeats
for black people to vote.
Deadly.
And now what they're doing at the school boards is they always pick on something, an acronym or a slogan. Now it's critical race theory, right? So you got mothers in Loudoun County, near here in Virginia, who were credited for voting for Bush against Trump, now are afraid their kids might be told the truth about American history. And I'll just tell you, when you have Vincent Harding helping you teach your kids, and you see it does them a world of good, and these parents are afraid of their kids learning this. So critical race, they never knew what critical race theory was. It's not being taught, but it won an election here in Virginia. So they pick on these things. So the latest is it's become an acronym and a target.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to talk with, I think it's roughly on Morning Joe, the guy who was behind the attack organizing the attack around critical race theory. And he even said explicitly on Twitter what CRT was aimed, what its objective was. It was supposed to be a catch-all phrase for everything that they didn't like, right? So it's very difficult, Jim, to argue with people about CRT when you know that they're arguing in bad faith. So it's not a matter of whether or not they actually understand what critical race theory is. We spend so much of our energy trying to say, that's not critical race theory. They're not teaching critical race theory. That's not the point.
They've never heard of it before.
That's not what that's not what they're doing. So what does it mean for us to lend credibility to the argument and then to respond to it in kind, right? When you should just simply dismiss them out of hand and ask them, what the hell are you doing? Right? What the hell are you doing? Yeah. Oftentimes we find ourselves in these spaces attributing good faith to our interlocutors when we shouldn't be.
They just might not understand something. So let's explain it to them, right? That's what they said back to us.
And
just explain.
And I said this on national television. I thought this was the last time I was ever going to be on television. What arrests American progress more than anything is this toxic combination. It is the loud racist, the loud bigot, the Tucker Carlson type, and the moderate liberal who worries that we're going too far. So the folks in Virginia who were suddenly in arms about critical race theory were the ones who are worried, not so much about the demographics, they're worried about us going too far. And that goes back to Abe Lincoln was alive when the 13th Amendment was ratified. The congressperson who helped author the 13th Amendment was against the 15th Amendment, which gave us the franchise. Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass is an abolitionist poem in its first edition. But by the time you read the last edition, he's redacted all of that out because he didn't believe black people had the capacity to take on the burdens of citizenship. He thought we were barbarians and baboons. So he was anti-slavery, but because he believed in this distinction between black and white, we couldn't go too far. You see the move? And so a lot of this around CRT is just an excuse so that people can pump the brakes because we don't want to go too far and we don't want to give up our schools. We don't want to be demographically displaced and historiographically replaced. And we can unpack
retain
what
our illusions. Our illusions.
I keep snapping at you. I'm sorry.
No. The reverse of what Jesus said, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. The reverse is, if you don't know the truth, or you deny the truth, or you run away, you'll stay captive. You'll stay captive to your illusions. That's right. So every time there's a betrayal, they want to bring the illusions back. They're afraid these moms in Loudoun County, their kids might not have all the illusions they have about what America really is.
Yeah. And it's the second iteration of the lost cause,
Yeah.
which was a lie.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. So the reason I love Begin Again for lots of reasons, but you talk about so well James Baldwin often feeling betrayal personally. It's personal. It's not just political or strategic. And you've often felt that too. I mean, as a scholar, as a university professor, Princeton's a really big deal, really is. But that betrayal is felt personally in this country by everyone who is still kind of asked every day, are you really as good as the rest of us? That betrayal, it's been personal for you too.
I have to raise a son in this mess.
Yeah.
One time, my son came from, we've done everything right. Look at me. Right? In some instances, I'm an example of the American dream, yes? I'm the exception that proves everything. My baby came home. He was at Brown at the time. He's now at Berkeley Law School. I have to brag on him. He came home and he was working, Jim, for this nonprofit around criminal justice reform. And he was so excited. He was going to lobby the State House in Trenton. And he had that tight H&M suit on. You know these kids with the tight, I'm sorry, y'all know y'all wear them tight H&M suits. I don't know how you sit it. And he had his tight H&M suit on, and he was ready to go, and he was gonna get in his little Honda Civic, and he was going to the thing. He was going to lobby. And he came home, and as soon as he walked in the house, my son's about 6'2". I was like, what's going on? What happened? And he said, Dad, I'm trying to park. And the police officer stops me. He said, you just gonna drive by me? I said, no, officer, I'm just trying to park. And he proceeds to cuss me out, Dad. And he tells me to go park over here. So I pull. Now, mind you, as he's telling me this, I'm beginning to see him bite down on the back of his jaw. I go to move where he tells me that I got stopped again, Dad, by another cop. And then he starts yelling at me and cussing at me. And then he tells me to go park over here. And Dad, I got stopped again. Excuse my language. And he says, and this motherfucker asked me, who's my PO? He asked me, who's my PO, Dad? And this 6'2" kid is telling me this, and he's tear running down his eye. And I'm trying to figure out, what do I do in this moment? You ain't never experienced that. How do I keep my baby whole in this moment? I mean, he called me, he asked me for my PO. So I went and got the 25 Macallan. Anybody know what 25 Macallan single malt scotch is? That proves that I'm part of the exception to the rule, right? So I poured a single malt and said, come on, let's talk this through. What does it mean to live in real time in the betrayal? It means that once again, I have to live with the risk that my baby might not come back to me. You see, so it's not an abstract proposition. It's not an abstract proposition. And so Baldwin, and he lived with the betrayal in this sense, Jim. He saw Medgar buried, Malcolm buried, Martin buried. He saw all of those young activists, those SNCC activists, those young students that he saw at Howard and Fisk in the Atlanta University Center who went down into the bowels of the South and risked everything. He saw some of them lose their minds. He saw some of them give up and flee the country. And then he saw the nation elect Ronald Reagan. The man he saw in California who did what he did while he was in. Because remember, for people in Black Power, Reagan was as notorious as George Wallace. You see, this is the juxtaposition. But you know, that's what does it mean to live in the betrayal? For me, it involved raising my son, and it also involved as a teacher. Let me say it differently. it also involves the risk in having faith in this place. Because I believe in America. How can I'm going to put it in Ralph Ellison's language. I refuse to cede the argument of America to these people. And when I refuse to cede the argument that is America to these folks, I take a risk of deep disappointment daily.
Because even they want to stay with their illusions.
Yeah. This is Eugene O'Neill's Iceman Cometh. Yeah. This is No Chance Saloon. People need their illusions, and the moment the illusions are shattered, I can't taste my liquor, hickey. Right? This is what Eugene O'Neill was trying to get at in that play. Yeah.
In many conversations like this in cities around the country, sometimes there's a panel of people who are speaking to these questions, and afterwards, a lot of us would go out for a drink, right? You have to, right? And after a while, you begin talking, and no matter how high a position in a university or city council or a mayor or whatever, that the black participants on the panel, no matter how high they have reached to be symbols of the American dream, after a few drinks, they all tell stories about their kids. It always comes down to how I feel different as a parent. And even in a place like Georgetown, I don't think Georgetown understands that white and black parents today live in different countries. We live in different countries when it comes to our kids, because it's those stories that come out every single time after these great conversations. And maybe that gets back to your the moderate people who think we're going too far, which was the focus of Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail. Because here it's going to be people who want to do incremental reform. And for them, for most white people, it's like, well, that should be enough if your kids weren't at risk every single day. So because it's personal, and I don't think we still get that, even in liberal places, that black and white parents literally today live in different countries. When it comes to the most important thing in any parent's life is your kids.
Right. And oftentimes our kids aren't given the luxury of being kids. I wrote a piece with my son in Time magazine when I said I wished that he was 7 years old, and he said, I wouldn't have been safe if I was 7. Look at Tamir, Dad. But I want to say this really quickly. It's not only that we live in separate worlds, it's what happens in those separate worlds, Jim. We need to start talking about the intimacy of our hatreds. I was thinking about this. I was writing about it. People knew who those men were who tied that fan to Emmett Till and threw him in the Tallahatchie River. They knew who those men were because they drank beer with them. They ate dinner with them. They went to the American Legion with them, perhaps. People know who stormed the Capitol and who attacked those police officers, because they're their aunts and your uncles, your brothers and sisters, local police officers and fire persons, their coaches.
Members of your churches.
The intimacy of our hatred. I say this all the time. If former Governor Northrop in Virginia loved somebody who was black, if he really loved someone or was loved by someone who was black, he would have never put on blackface. Ever. Our segregated lives mean that we are walking mysteries to each other. And hatred festers in the gaps. It grows in those intimate spaces where you don't know us and we don't know you. And boom, we find ourselves on this tragic hamster wheel.
A way to speak to that might be, a lot of people here probably realize that all of this is structural. we want to move beyond the privatizing to the structural racism. But what happens in the spaces of the structures? That's what you're raising for us. What happens it's structural, yes. What's happening in those spaces? So it's a faith and justice center, we're at Georgetown, I have to ask the question about religion, about faith. Now, you have written extensively about the critical role played by the Black church during the civil rights movement, where the church was inspiration and infrastructure, both for that movement. But many people might not know that you have a Catholic background. You're Roman Catholic. Might suspect you're Baptist or AME or something like that.
I went to Morehouse after.
Yeah, okay. So, but here you're at Georgetown, and this is a Jesuit institution with those values. So what has your Catholic faith meant to you in all of this? And in particular, getting to how religion is clearly complicit in everything we're talking about. King talked about the most sacred hour was 11 o'clock Sunday. My students always get struck by that one, that quote. But how can complicit religion become a redemptive part of the struggle? We're complicit. So what is first your Catholic history and background tradition? You can testify at Georgetown. But how does religion move from just being complicit to being redemptive in the refounding that we need?
Sure. So I'm born and raised on the coast of Mississippi. My last name is Glaude Jr, right? So hour and 45 minutes away from New Orleans. My dad is my color, but everybody else, green eyes, light skin, you get the point. I grew up in the first Catholic mission on the coast of Mississippi, St. Peter's Apostolic Catholic Church. And it's the Josephite tradition. I grew up with St. Martin de Porres right over there. The whole time. I remember getting in trouble when I took my first communion. I remember my mother looking at me. I think I was already a rebel. Were you there when they crucified my stomach? That's what I say. And I was singing it loudly because I did not like the wine on the communion. But there's a sense of community that I learned at St. Peter's. I didn't go to Catholic school. I went to CCD. And they put me up, and I remember trying to understand the Trinity, and Sister Mildred, who was the principal, got really angry with me because I was unrelenting in my pursuit of trying to understand the Trinity. But there was a sense of the moral and the ethical that was constituted in that space. And it was a Black space, right? It's a Black Catholic church. Bishop Howes, the first Black bishop, comes from our diocese. Norval, the bishop that was in D.C., he comes from my parish in St. Peter's, right? There's a deep connection here. Robert Norval, right? Our parish in Pascagoula, Mississippi. The answer to your question, there's a moral issue at the heart of our politics. And the moral question is always, who do we take ourselves to be? Mm-hmm. Who do we aspire to be? And how might religion play a role from moving from complicit? Remember that the prophetic key is always the minor key. It's never the major chord. It's always the minor key. And so our task is not to become court prophets. Our task is to bear witness to the truth in the face of the operations of power. And the moment we become court prophets is the moment we become Constantinian Christians. Right? I want to stand in an adjacent relation to power, right? And bear witness to the truth. Because I want, now I'm going to sound a little less Catholic. I want folks to be like, what's wrong with them? They must be drunk. Oh, that's Acts, right? I want to have a discordant relationship to the way the world is currently organized and bear witness to why that is the case.
I'm really struck by that line. Write this one down, folks. The prophetic is always the minor key, not the major key. When the church wants to be a major key, or the major key, Constantinian, the state church, or today, church want to be influential and powerful. When we want to be the major key, we lose that prophetic. Yeah.
It's gone.
Well, I want to ask you a question about students and young people, but I'm going to best to introduce you all coming to 2 microphones just have been set up. And I want you to feel free to stand behind a microphone. And I want you to remember that the best way to understand a question, the best way to identify a question is to be a question, as opposed to a sermon or a commentary or a thesis. So I know the difference between the two. So I'm going to ask Dr. Glaude a question about students, and then I want you all to start lining up, if you will. So we're full of lots of people here, but the students here at this university, I know a lot of them didn't want to get out of their pajamas, but wanted to watch this, so they're watching too. You and I have talked about this. Sometimes, some of us, when we finally saw this video, the George Floyd moment in our pandemic, and people hit the streets, I remember both you and I were a little cynical about what this was really a thing or not, but then it became a thing. And a lot of young people, and older white people, we'd never seen so many white people in the streets. We talked about that. But now what that has become, or what that's becoming, and what that means, you asked the question in the Washington Post piece, how do we imagine a multiracial democracy? That's the question. So what is the role of a new generation in imagining and expecting and demanding a multiracial democracy? Your students at Princeton, you have this conversation all the time. What are you asking or challenging or requiring students to say, to be a part of that or not?
Yeah, I mean, they're at the center of it, Just to, really quickly, I tend to describe this current generation as the catastrophic generation. You've been born in cascading crises. You've come of age in cascading crises. And so what's so distinctive about you is that you know the place is broken. You know it's broken. And so by virtue of that insight, you have the space to imagine, otherwise, how to intervene. But there's no guarantee. Remember, Dylan Roof is not a baby boomer. Most of the folks who are running around, one of the interesting things about the current Ukraine crisis is that we think Vladimir Putin saying that he's engaged in denazification. It sounds strange, but Ukraine is the global center of the neo-Nazi movement. Russia is at the center of a certain kind of global white nationalist imaginary. It's a collision happening between these forces in very interesting ways. It's not being reported, but we're seeing it play out on the borders, right? As black and brown folk are trying to get out of Ukraine and trying to get into other places, right? So it's a really fascinating story. So there's no guarantee that because you're young, that you will reach for more progressive languages to respond to what is broken. Some folk are reaching for older languages to respond to what is broken. They're reaching for fascism. They're reaching for authoritarianism. They're reaching for that which can create order in the face of chaos. So what's distinctive about them is that they know it's broken. The question is, what choice will they make to intervene?
I see a question, and please feel free to stand in line. Here's some more coming, so that's great. If you
Y'all
could,
can ask me anything. Doesn't mean I'm going to answer, but you can ask me anything.
if you could just tell us your name and where you're from. Place means a lot, where you're from, and what's your major or study here is it. I'm going to give priority to Georgetown students for the questions, but please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kesley Janvier. I'm a freshman in the college studying biology, And I'm from, okay, it's a long story, but I used to live in London, but I grew up in Queens as well. My question is around like how we start to imagine what not post-racial, sorry, wrong word, what a like multiracial society looks like. I spent a lot of time in Mariam Kaba essays about like reimagining what a world without policing looks like. And I feel like the imagining part is always the hardest part. And after that, we can kind of move on. But we have to communicate this urgency that we kind of have to think about it now and do something now because people are dying. So how do we take the time to come up with good solutions, but still do so in a manner that's quick and effective?
Such a great question. You know, there's a line in Ralph Waldo Emerson where he says, God speaks to us through our imaginations. And I'm always, whenever I tell my students that, Jim, I said, if God is speaking to us through our imaginations, then what is the devil doing? Trying to keep us permanently docked in the station. To see the world as it is all that it could be and can be. So part of what we have to do is to understand the imagination as a battleground. Right? There's a way in which we even debate policy in the United States, right? In order to keep you from imagining that no one should go broke because they're sick, they tell you before you even get to it that we can't afford it. So we can't even begin to think of a healthcare system that reflects our obligation to each other because they want to shut it down before you can even imagine what work would look like if you actually had a living wage, what this society would look like if everyone had access to education, right? They don't even want us to imagine that. So they shut it down with language like that's communism, right? Or these people are lazy and they only want a handout. So oftentimes what we have to do in the moment is to try to shift the axis of how we see the problem in front of us, to introduce new language. So one of the things I tried to do in Democracy in Black is to not have people get caught up on white supremacy, so I introduced the value gap. That's something about, we have the empathy gap and the achievement gap. Well, why don't we talk about the ways in which human beings are valued differently, which is at the heart of whites. Just trying to introduce a different lexicon. So oftentimes, how we go about doing the work in real time is creating the space so that people can imagine themselves otherwise. Really quickly, I know we got some more questions, but you come out of a great tradition. There's nothing in the life of a slave to lead her to believe that she could be anything but a slave. But she could see the glimmer in the eye of a man right in front of her. She could see love there, just for a second, even though he could be snatched away from her. She might hear the sound of laughter, the innocence of children playing, even though they might see a level of brutality that no child should ever witness. In that flit in the eye, that sound of innocence is the space to imagine a whole different world. So find room in the gaps. And that's where we do some real serious revolutionary work.
So a generation that sees the world as broken can lead to cynicism or imagination, right?
Thank you so much.
You get your finger snapped at you, that's good.
I hope that's an answer.
Okay.
Y'all about to get me to
I know
shout,
this
and you're going to
guy.
see a Catholic up in here.
Joel, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Joel. I'm from New York. I'm a junior in the college studying government and Africana philosophy. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I was really interested in, hearing what you had to say about the tension between, the out loud racist and the moderate liberal who won't go far enough. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to this idea of going too far and what might be required of us as individuals in creating a new culture and in interrogating ourselves, because you spoke about refounding, and I think most of us can speak to what's required of government, what's required of shifting our politics, but in terms of not just holding each other accountable, but creating a cultural shift. What do you think is required of us in interacting with one another and creating and generating a new culture?
That's a great question. In, I think it was 1995, Robert Putnam wrote an article entitled Bowling Alone. and then it became a book in 2000. And part of what he was trying to do is to chart a kind of breakdown of kind of civic associational life by looking at these bowling leagues, right, that were disappearing. But in some ways, that example is an example of the effect of a certain kind of political rationality. Let's call it neoliberalism, right? And what neoliberalism what it does, it's political rationality. It transforms us from citizens in association with each other to self-interested persons in competition and rivalry with each other in pursuit of our own aims and ends. And so there's a kind of breakdown where we're all just pursuing. We even have a gospel, a Christian gospel that's concomitant with it, right? The sow your seed, right? It's prosperity gospel, right? That fits with the same logic, right? And so the result of this kind of the collapse of associational life, we're all becoming self-interested persons in competition and rivalry with each other, is that there's a shredding of any robust notion of the public good. It's a complete undermining of our responsibility to each other. We see it right now with these masks, right? We see it clearly in the context of the pandemic, right? And so part of what we have to do in this moment is to, I think, give voice to a different kind of moral and social compact, right? I don't know what our obligations are to each other in this country anymore. I really don't know what is the baseline agreement for the quality of life that we expect Americans to have. Because we're all retreated, we have retreated into our individual silos. And part of really quickly, for some, desegregation meant abdication. So if you're going to give black people access to the park, I'm not going to come to the park, and then I'm going to complain that you're using my tax money to pay for the park. If you're going to desegregate schools, I'm going to pull my kids out, and I'm going to go to parochial schools, and then I'm going to complain about my tax money going there, and then argue for school vouchers so that it can go over here. So we see an abdication from public life. And so the short answer to the question is we need to give voice to, I believe, a basic moral and social and ethical compact that is at the heart of the refounding. I believe that every American should make a living wage. I believe that every American, no matter the color of their skin, their zip code, who they love, their gender, their ability, should be able to get the best education possible. I believe that nobody, because they're sick, should go broke. I believe that it should be our compact with each other that we got you. But instead, we're selfish, we're greedy, we hoard, and no society can be sustained in that regard. So what can we do? Give voice to a different kind of moral and social compact that announces a different way of being in the world that isn't this zero-sum game that Heather McGhee talks about, right? But rather a sense in which prosperity of the richest country in the history of the world is shared among us all.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yeah. You see, I've been thinking about it.
That's even a religious mission, what you talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Samantha Baldwin. I took Professor Wallace's class last semester, so I read your incredible book and really appreciate you being here. I'm an MPP student, but also going to be at the business school next year. And my question sort of comes out of where I grew up, which is near Boston, Massachusetts, very heavily segregated city and state. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of wondering, how do we make this betrayal personal for the wealthy white moderates for whom racism is just abstract? They agree that it exists, but it's not personal to them. How can we change that?
Boy, if I have the answer to some of these questions, I need to come to DC. No, I think this is a really great question. And we saw in New York City how certain of those folks, even those who were clearly Democratic, liberal. Remember when the chancellor wanted to desegregate the schools in Manhattan? And what did we see? All hell broke loose. All hell broke loose. So part of, I think, what we have to do, in some ways, we have to continue to produce policy that forces a choice. Policy that forces a choice. And this is just me talking off the top of my head, particularly around education and particularly around housing. How do we begin to, through policy, address these two areas that reproduce long-term inequality, in my view, and force the top 1%, as you're describing them, who are in some ways liberal, to make a choice. It seems to me that when we've done it before, we see where they choose. We see what they choose. That's not an answer. I don't know. I don't know. To me, my job is simply to bear witness and tell them the truth when I see them. But I don't know. Is that an honest answer?
That is an honest answer, and it is an answer I will take. So thank you very much.
I don't know.
Over here.
Oh, they bother me. That's why the letter from Birmingham Jail is so important. Hi.
My name is Pratik. I'm a freshman in the college studying government. My question is, what, based on like the past two reckonings you talk about, do you think this third one, if you can predict at all, what it would look like, and what would sort of be the preceding signs or steps to it?
You know, when I declared that we were experiencing a moral reckoning, I forgot to say that every reckoning comes with the betrayal. We're in the midst of it. You are living in real time in the middle of the betrayal. So we're facing or confronting what I'm calling in my new book, the choice. Will we double down again? Or will we choose a different path? Our clamoring for getting back to normal, our longing for what was before the pandemic, right, will seal our fate. So I have no answer where we're going to end up. In the book, I invoke Beckett. In Begin Again, I say, you know, we've been here before. If our history is any indication, we will fail. But as Beckett says in Wordsworth Ho, fail again, fail better. So prayerfully, we will fail better this time. But as I listened to the President's State of the Union the other night, my heart sunk. I mean, we could talk about that a bit more.
Well, why don't, you're going to say this on Meet the Press on Sunday. I'll ask you about State of the Union. So tell us why your heart sunk.
Two things. One is that we're at a moment of crisis at home and abroad, and such a moment requires eloquence in the Roman and ancient sense. He needed to soar, to offer us language, to imagine ourselves in grander terms than the messiness of our lives suggest. Lists of achievements and desires don't rise to the level of eloquence. The second point is that the lists suggest to me that they're not big thinkers around. The people who are managing, who are tracking the headlines and managing the details are doing a lot of the work. Don't defund the police, fund the police. I said the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is dead, and it was already milk toast. I was thinking about all of those people who were in the streets after George was murdered and what they were arguing for. And I heard the same rhetoric that I heard all throughout the 90s about crime and needing to fund police, even though there was this kind of addition of reforming police. So that bothered me. Particularly, I'm just talking about the list now. What also bothered me was that, voting rights was a blip.
When it's everything. Voting rights.
If you're going to defend democracy abroad, you have to secure democracy at home.
That's right.
And I understood that he took the Build Back Better Act and he broke it up into pieces and gave us some really, I was happy to hear it fight for, $15 minimum wage. I was happy to hear a range of things. But again, we needed a kind of framing. By the accident of history, ours is the responsibility for democracy as such. And the question is, what will we do? And I didn't get that from the list.
You're asking about the soul of the nation, not just the state of the nation.
Yes. Yes.
And how respond to bad language, coded language, like defund the police, instead of laying out an agenda for accountability for the police.
And I've tried to give the people I know language. We need to shift from law and order to safety and security. Every community deserves to be safe. Every community deserves to be secure. Our conception of justice in the United States, Jim, and I know we got to have questions. The notion of justice in the United States is always tethered to exceptions. From the very beginning. People we want to be secure. We want policing to treat everyone with dignity, but you need to police those. We're okay with how that community is being policed. We want schools to be this way, but we're okay for these schools to be that way. We want houses to be different, but we're okay with that. We have a conception of justice that's always, right, with the exceptions. Why can't we get our conception? Why can't we offer a notion of justice without exception?
Yeah.
That's like asking,
That's
why
right.
can't we have love without exception, right? But anyway, yes, who are you going? Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Judy Code.
Hi, Judy.
It's been a very long time since I was a student, so not a student. I actually have two questions. I'm wondering if you could just speak to the role
I'll be really
of
quick.
nonviolence in the historic and current efforts to make this an anti-racist society. And secondly, can you name specific steps or actions the Catholic Church of the United States can take to become a positive role in have a positive role in the anti-racist efforts?
So I think that the second question is is easy. I think we just need to live up to what Pope Francis has said, and the tradition out of which he comes. I think that would be really, really good. I could say a lot more, but I won't, in relation to where the Catholic Church in the United States has decided to dig its feet in. I could say a lot more, but I'm not. In terms of the first question, violence always carries with it the danger of harming the most precious aspect of this planet, and that is life itself. Right? So I understand nonviolence. The appeal to nonviolence for me has everything to do with how much I value life. But oftentimes nonviolence is invoked as a kind of litmus test to see if I'm the good Negro. Right? Where do you stand on nonviolence? Where's your position? Because it's really a measure of whether or not I'm actually a dangerous one. Right? And so for me, I embrace nonviolence out of my commitment and love of life, but I understand from whence violence. And so I'm really more interested in asking the U.S. nation state, when will it become nonviolent? If that makes sense, yeah.
Two more.
Hi there, I'm Zach.
Hi, Zach.
I'm a sophomore in the School of Foreign Service studying international history. Again, I'm a broken record here, but thank you so much for coming and speaking to all of us today. So my question reflects a theme you've emphasized here about the refoundation of America based on the true principles of racial equality, and not only a reform of it, but again, a refoundation. And so if I may briefly entertain a thought experiment, sure. Assuming there was, say, a second constitutional convention, and there was an opportunity to truly refound America based on the principle of racial equality and racial justice, what would it look like? What are some of the principles that would come out of it? What are some of its key tenets? What are some of the, what would be the new Bill of Rights, if you will?
I mean, damn. This is great. You know, in some ways, I'm with Douglass on this. Frederick Douglass. Right? That the Constitution, not as it is, right, but as it could be read, is actually can be a liberatory document. The Declaration of Independence, understood not as a doctrine only applicable to some, but to all, right, is actually very powerful, right? Perhaps moving the 14th Amendment, amendment around women's voting, out of the amendments into the body of the Constitution, making explicit that race has no determination in how we understand citizenship, right? This sort of way, right, to give voice in the preamble to a sustained commitment to the idea that ours is a democracy for all, no matter the color of your skin, you know, your class position, your gender, your ability, right? This sort of, that, you see what I'm saying? Right, to put the values up front, and those values are there. Right? That's why we keep saying, why do we need a Voting Rights Act? You got the 15th, what's going on? Yeah, right? So if only we live up to what, as Dr. King said, live up to what you put on paper. Yeah. You know. Thank you so much. Thank you for the question. Whew.
So we'll have a new constitutional convention here soon. But it really, this comes up in our classes too. What would it mean to take the narratives that we have, which, you know, when a bunch of white, I own a house and I'm a white man, so I never had a voting problem. Everybody else has, right? So what would it mean to rethink all of that based, the idea that a king should be in charge was a revolutionary idea, sort of. They just didn't imagine what it would mean, right? So how do we take the narrative, and narrative is so important here. How do we change the narrative? Narrative changes culture and policy. So we're talking about culture and policy. You guys can change a narrative, I think, and that's what changes policy and culture.
And remember the historical example of Haiti. Haiti, the Haitian Revolution, has to be understood in some ways as being more consistent with the principles articulated in the French Revolution. Toussaint Louverture gets in trouble, in effect, because he still sees himself as a revolutionary, living up to the precepts and principles of the French Revolution, which he says Napoleon and France they cannot make us slaves again. So there's a way in which the Haitian Revolution is rooted in trying to make real the ideals articulated in the French Revolution before Napoleon arrests it, you see? So what would it look like? Well, maybe we should simply live into what the hell we said. Yes.
Hello, hi, my name is Nicolette. I am a sophomore in the college and I'm studying government, minoring in justice and peace studies and music. And my question, you were talking about we need more big big thinkers in government, and there are some, but they're being stopped at like every step of the way. Elizabeth Warren came here and she said, all these ideas, especially after Biden was elected, there's so many ideas that were put on the table, but they're just consistently being stopped and pushed back. Yeah. So my question to you is that, knowing that hate is taught and knowing that a lot of the people in power were indoctrinated to believe these things and believe hate and racism, how do we, as young people, unteach the generation in power to finally make a reality where we have a good future? And then I have a second question, but
don't worry about it. Go ahead. Don't worry about teaching the older generation. Just do it. Just do it. What I mean by that is very, very straightforward. The age of Reagan is dying. It's dead. It has proven itself to be bankrupt. It has produced this current way. People don't want to admit it, but the age, Joe Scarborough, I even got Joe to admit it. The age of Reagan is dying, is dead. If that's true, listen, if that's true, then the Democratic Party that came into existence to respond to it is dead. So that means the third way that we have been grappling with since Gary Hart? Yeah. Or before, DLC and all of his children. It's not just the Republican Party blocking the ideas. Yeah. Our problem isn't just on one side of the aisle. So I think, let's not, I have spent so much of my energy, Nicolette, right?
Yes.
We spend so much of our energy trying to convince people who don't believe that we're fully human, that they ought not to believe it, that we don't have enough energy left to build a new Jerusalem. So I'm giving up I don't want to spend all of my energy trying to convince somebody to believe that I'm a human. I'm going to go about trying to build a new Jerusalem. So don't worry about teaching these folks. Just let's get to work. Let's get to work.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you. And my second question was about how you were mentioning the betrayals that happen, when big change happens. I've noticed that in those, the response to the betrayals, when they do go back to racism and everything, it's always in a way that's hidden. Like Reagan had Black people who voted for him. Reagan was supposedly this pragmatic kind of guy who people seemed universally liked. He was very popular. And there's even after the Reconstruction, these racist people were able to hide behind the fact that the northern troops left the South, and then the South was left to their own devices. So in each of these instances, they were able to hide behind them going back to their racist ideas. How do we, if that happens again, how do we make sure people realize, how do we, I guess my question is, how do we illuminate what they're actually trying to do? How do we make sure that, what they're how do we, illuminate, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly.
Be courageous enough to call them out for it, to tell the truth. Nicolette, you're going to experience this, so are you. So are you. Every day you're going to have to come to terms with whether or not you're going to take the bribe. Every day. Whether or not you're going to take the bribe, whether or not you're going to be the latest billboard to say that this is the greatest country on earth. Whether or not you're going to sit and stand in the exception. Yes, I'm a tenured professor at Princeton, mother only. I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi, but look at me. I'm an example of the American dream. Every day you're going to have to come to terms with whether or not you're going to take the bribe. Because what happens every time is that they turn around and some of us will gain access, become the face in the high place. We tinker around the edges, and nothing fundamentally changes. So you have to make the choice. Will you be courageous enough? Will you be courageous enough to speak the truth, to bear witness in the moment? Bear witness. Jimmy did. And he said in the evidence of things not seen. And there's a book written about the Atlanta child murders. When all of those black babies were being killed in a city too busy to hate, run by black people. He said, oh, the real work begins now that segregation is over. What do we really mean by freedom? You see? So that's the answer. I'm being as melodramatic as I can be, right? Because it becomes a personal thing. Will you take the bribe? Will you take those pieces of silver? That's the question we all have to ask ourselves in this moment. Thank you, Nicola.
The phrase call it out, that's the key thing, call it out. I don't want to, we teach at elite universities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Where the students are smart enough and are taught to the ones who will manage the systems in the future. But I would say the students I meet here in Princeton are smart enough to call out the system. And the difference in managing it and calling it out is...
But how do we make sure that those people will be listened to?
Okay, here's my last question for you as we grow up, because it's on this. They code stuff. Like Stacey Abrams says, while her grandparents were afraid of billy clubs and dogs and hoses about voting suppression, now she said it's all in the administration. It's in barriers. It's in late night decision making. And so it's in, because we don't tolerate the dogs and stuff anymore. So it's all very subtle. Or the other question, calling out those people who say they're for all this. Or the language of critical race theory, or no, I don't defund the police. No, not reimagining public security, but no, I want to combat that. So call out, I want to ask you, when I watch him on TV, and I told him, I watch and pray, because he's on all these shows, and I watch and pray, because he always, I think you have a real prophetic gift, I'll just say, to go deeper than the question that's being asked. A question is asked, and instead of just reacting to some slogan, you always try to take the conversation deeper. And I think that's what your generation has to learn how to do, to call this out. It's taking the conversation deeper than just reacting or responding to their coding. I just was told that Tucker Carlson has raised Ketanji Brown's Jackson. What were her LSAT scores? He just said, yeah, yesterday. So
Kissing my teeth.
there you go. So we're going to face that all the time. But he's not going to he's not going to say what he really thinks in that language. He's going to code it, right? So what advice do you give this generation about you're learning and you struggle some of those mornings I watch you and they're putting you in a corner. But how do you do what she's saying? How do you take a question and go deeper and not just react or respond or get in the kind of battle that's going on and just take sides in the battle? How do you take us deeper to the soul of the nation, culture and policy, and not just the state of the nation in competitive partisan combat?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. So the first thing I'm not concerned with is brand. So when I'm on television, I'm not preoccupied with being on television because I have a job. So that's the first thing. So I'm not really thinking about, well, how am I being figured here? So I actually can spend my energy cultivating the habits of listening so that I can answer what is being asked as opposed to just simply saying what I think needs to be said in the time that I have the platform. Because if you notice, within the frame, people come with agendas. They have what they want to say. The person is asking a question. They answer with whatever they want to answer with. They don't necessarily attend to the question. So that's the second thing. So first thing is I'm not there about branding. I'm not about my brand. Second thing, cultivate the habits of listening. And the third thing is that I'm always trying to figure out, Jim, how to bring the fullness of my bibliography to bear in a soundbite. I am a philosopher by training, philosopher of religion. I'm a scholar of John Dewey. Dewey says philosophy at its best is when we bring our skill sets to bear on the problems of men and women. I have a PhD from Princeton, right? Even though they won't, I'm the former president of the American Academy of Religion. We were having a conversation on Morning Joe about evangelicalism, and they didn't even have me on the set. I was there, and I said, do you guys know I was this? And they were like, no, we didn't, right? And so part of what I've been trying to do is to figure out how to bring the fullness of my bibliography to bear on a topic, so that I have these texts at my fingertips, ready to be able to deploy when we're talking about this, that, and the other. So what is that lesson for young people? Is bring some depth and gravitas to the task. Don't stay at the surface. Click and bait is the thing for now. But you can actually find a different kind of niche with depth and substance. But the only way to do that is to get your reading done. Is to bring some sense of excellence to the thing. So it's really, I'm always trying to think about how to inhabit the soundbite. What can I do in this 30 seconds that I have? And when Nicole Wallace gave me that, I mean, I had about 2 minutes TV time. That's a lifetime. And it went viral. 22 million people have seen that segment where I said, this is us. That entire riff, I had literally just written it for Begin Again. It was all me thinking about Baldwin and figured out how to channel it in that moment. Mm-hmm. But I could do that because I'm not worried about whether or not they're going to invite me the next day. Right. Or whether or not I looked good doing it. You know, so.
And everybody has platforms. Don't you say, well, I have that platform. Everybody has platforms. Oh. And until we use all our platforms for this deeper conversation, we're not going to get to democracy.
I see we have one more question, or are we good?
Oh, do we? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'll be really quickly, because I know we got the producers over here doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not TV. No, just kidding. I'm Guilford Monroe. I'm from New York City, and I'm joined by the Holy Row. These are all clergy, men and women from across the country, and we're here to talk about gun violence and the way that we see things for the next day. Well, we're here from today, and we're leaving tomorrow. But in your analysis, what are some of your thoughts with race and violence in our communities, especially when it comes to gun violence, especially in urban America? In terms of how you think about things, what are you thinking would be the response for America when we have urban violence, and then maybe when we have mass shootings? Like, what are some of your thoughts around that?
Right, I appreciate you. Now I see why you laughed when I kissed my teeth. You understand? It wasn't a civilized thing to do, as my mother-in-law would tell me. You know, but so you know, I think we cannot. I mean, it's a sign of Americans, a unique form of American madness, that we can't seem to pass reasonable gun control laws, right? And we tend to think of this as a Southern thing. Remember where all the gun manufacturing industries are. We're talking in Massachusetts, and how they're driving policy in interesting sorts of ways. We don't want to exceptionalize the South in this regard, right? Who's at the center of producing the guns? Where are those industries located, and how they're having an impact on the nation broadly? So our communities are inundated with these guns, and so the failure of the nation to pass sensible gun control laws has a direct impact on communities like Southeast and DC, like places in New York, Trenton, and the like, because guns flood those communities. Then we have the rhetoric of black-on-black crime, which has always been a rhetorical red herring. When you have a residentially segregated community, most crime, it will be communities on, particular people. We don't have a category for white on white crime, right? When most crime is actually happening between white communities, white, because that's how our communities are organized in certain ways. So if you're really against black on black crime, let's desegregate America in some ways, and then maybe we can prey on each other. That might be an answer. So that's the second point. The third point is that we have to also address many of these are resource-deprived communities, right? These are opportunity deserts, as we call them, as I call them, right? And because these are resource-deprived communities, people are inhabiting the underground economy, and that underground economy has in circulation all of these guns. So when you combine resource deprivation, education's basic civic institutions aren't functioning like they should, right? With a country, the richest country in the world, Du Bois writes in 1903, what does it mean to be a poor people in a country awash in money, right? You're gonna get what we see. But instead of demonizing our community, let's start addressing the underlying systemic issues that lead to the kind of violence that you guys are organizing and that we thank you for in very clear and decided ways. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Would you join me in thanking Eddie Glaude for being with us tonight?